Katanagatari is an anime from 2010, which follows a mysterious scheming girl named Togame and a boy named Shichika who go across Japan to collect 12 legendary swords. Shichika acts as Togame's living sword with his martial arts, as they have to fight off various other groups who have the same goal as they do. Now, Katanagatari is a really gorgeous show, with just great animation, an exceptional soundtrack, and really long, interesting, and well thought out dialogue scenes. And these are helped because each episode is 50 minutes long, which is twice as long as a normal anime episode. As some friends have said to me, it's like the HBO of anime. However, for all these good points, Katanagatari is ruined by its ending. Now, you may say, the ending's not that important. It's about the journey, not the destination. But I think, even though there are a lot of different stories, every good story's gotta have, put it basically, a beginning, a middle, and an end. Now, just as an example, if we go to one of the great animes, Lucky Star. Now, Lucky Star is widely considered to be a kind of mediocre, unremarkable anime. But the genre is important. Slice of life anime, well known for not really anything happening. Pretty plotless, you might say. However, even in Lucky Star, as the series advances, the characters move up through high school years, and we meet more and more characters. So there's some kind of plot-based inertia that carries the series along. They even have an ending where all the characters get together and then they do the dance from the very first thing we see in the show, the opening theme. Which, even though it's not, like, nothing really much happened, it ties the whole thing together very well. This is an example of taking not much to work with and putting a nice poetic finish on it, making it feel satisfying. So, coming to Katanagatari, the person who recommended the show to me mentioned how good the ending was. This got me pretty excited. As I was going through the show, I was had my expectations up. But also, as I watched, a few other friends mentioned to me that they had seen the show and how bad they thought the ending was. Now, this sets off a flag in my brain, because when it comes to anime, there are a lot of ways they can screw up the ending. Firstly, the no conclusion style of ending. This usually happens because anime is based off a written work, and they're out of budget, or they weren't scheduled to make any more episodes, and there really is no written ending. So they kind of slap together a little final episode, everyone's happy, and we leave it at some kind of equilibrium. Now, this kind of ending, it's the best they can do with the material, but it's not very satisfying if we've seen characters develop and we're hoping for some kind of conclusion and one just doesn't come. Secondly, sometimes we get bad sequel bait. We see this happen in all kinds of media. For example, take the ending of Oregairu just recently, last season. All the plot points are leading up to some kind of conclusion, and they almost censor the final scene. And to North American audiences, it might not make much sense. What they're doing is encouraging you to buy the original book the series is based off so you can find out the true ending. If that's not annoying, I don't know. Now, after that, we have totally out of place or bizarre endings. First thing that comes to mind is School Days. School Days is a kind of mediocre, low-grade high school romance anime, but it's famous for the final scene involving one of the characters grabbing a gigantic kitchen knife and stabbing and dismembering the other cast with blood spurting everywhere. Completely out of the blue and over the top. Now, above all this, there's one worse kind of ending you can get on your anime. And this is the kind that goes back and invalidates all your favorite things that happen throughout the show. Now, as one example of a recent anime, Ore no imoto ga konna ni kawai wake ga nai, or Oremo, as it's normally called. In this show, well, it's a strange story, but in the end, we get just a bizarre conclusion with the main character marrying his sister. And I won't get too far into it, but with all of the things that have happened throughout the show, it's a huge throwaway. It's like, what did we waste our time for? Just, ugh. More pertinently, Samurai Champloo, this pretty well critically acclaimed anime, We have all these plot threads leading up. We have these three characters journeying across Japan to their final goal. And in the end, we don't get anything. A lot of false climaxes, and the whole journey seems to be for nothing at all. This kind of ending, I find, is extremely frustrating, and unfortunately, that's what we get in Katanagatari. Now, what's going to follow are complete spoilers for the end of Katanagatari. So, if you haven't watched the end, and you don't want to be spoiled, I'd recommend clicking away. However, I also don't recommend you watch the end. So, your choice. Now, at the end of the show, Shichika and Togame succeed in gathering all the swords. However, Togame's identity as the daughter of a rebel leader from the Sengoku Warring States period is found out, and Hite-hime, the opposing kind of princess character, has her killed. Pretty unceremoniously, too. What you say? That you only meant well, 'cause you did. What you say? So she bleeds out, and in her dying breath, she tells Shichika that she never cared about him, and he was just an instrument in her plan. And then she dies. Then, speaking of plans, we find out Hite has been pulling the strings this whole time, and it was her goal to gather all of these legendary swords together. Now, it's kind of unclear why, and anyway, Shichika sees Togame die, he gets really mad, and we have a shonen gauntlet to close out the series where Shichika destroys all of the swords, kills a bunch of guys, and then kills the shogun, who is kind of made out to be the villain, even though we haven't seen him until this point. And that concludes the story. Now, this may sound kind of like a fitting end. However, if we look at the individual points of it, we'll see that it really doesn't make any sense at all. It's a big collection of kind of nonsensical dead ends. Firstly, what was everyone's plan gathering the swords? In the final episodes, there's lots of reference to the intentions of the creator of the swords. His name, I think, is Shikazaki Kiki or something, but I don't remember. I'm just going to call him Kiki for now. And Kiki's plan is some contrived thing. He built a bunch of swords, and there's a prophecy or something. Anyway, Hite-hime wanted to collect all the swords because she's the descendant of the sword maker, and that was going to fulfill his plan. However, when it comes down to it, we have a scene where she explicitly tells us she doesn't actually care if his plan comes to fruition or not. So what was she doing? What did she go to all the trouble of doing? And to make matters worse, the plan was never really clear. Was the plan, did he create the swords so the swords would be destroyed by Shichika? Because he's also part of the plan. So what's going on here? Anyway, in the end, Shichika kills the shogun and destroys all the swords. That's over with. We also have to consider Togame's intentions collecting the swords, which was the central point of the entire show. We know Togame wants revenge and something. She mentions to Shichika that she hated him and she's just trying to get revenge for her father dying. And that's why she's collecting the swords. However, she's collecting the swords for the shogun. Didn't the current shogun, since he took over the Warring States period, wouldn't he be the one responsible for having her father killed? And she's working for him? What does she want the swords for? And how is it going to help her plan at all? So in the end, we don't really find out why people were collecting the swords, which was the central focus of the story, and all the swords get destroyed. The second, and possibly more grievous point, is just why did Togame die? Firstly, if we do a feminist reading, just briefly, of this anime, and many other animes, it's really an ugly picture. So often we see a female character getting killed or hurt just to provide motivation for the main male character. And here's no exception. If we look at another anime, namely a pretty well-known show called Midai Nikki, Future Diary, the central appeal of this show is the crazy, murderous girl named Yuno, who kind of takes the front cover on everything, and is the creepiest but most interesting character. The main character who, like, do we even know his name? It's Yuki or something? Like, it's like trying to remember the name of the main character, Shia LaBeouf in the Transformers movies. He relates to the audience, he gives us a window into this fantastical story, but he really has no bearing on the plot, and he's more of a silent observer. However, in favor of him, near the end of the story, is essentially killed off, and the story suddenly shifts over to our silent protagonist, and the story just flops at that point, because really, what did he have? He had no control of the whole show, and now he's supposed to tie things up. The same thing happens in Katanagatari. Togame, although supposedly sharing protagonist roles with Shichika, is the only motivator of the plot, and I'd go as so far to say is the only character with a real personality between the two of them. It's stated in the show, Shichika isn't much of a social guy. He grew up in isolation on an island practicing only martial arts, and near the beginning of the show he devotes himself completely to the cause of protecting Togame and, as they say, just acting as a living sword. So although Shichika is along for the ride, he's not in control of the events that happen in the story, and he doesn't know Togame's intentions, which are carrying the plot along. So with Togame dead, just to give Shichika a little push, make him mad, just to give Shichika some motivation, it's offensive, it's disappointing. The reasoning behind this huge plot point is not even adequately explained in the series. We know that Togame and Hite are enemies, but it's also shown they're kind of just rivals. They don't want each other dead. Togame's identity as the princess is found out, and we're led to believe this means she has to be killed. I theorize it's because she was an enemy of the state during the rebellion, which her father was part of, and she would be his successor. However, isn't she working for the government right now? And if she was an enemy of the government, why would it be Hite's decision to kill her? Does she work for the government? If it's because this would interfere with the master plan involving the 12 swords, it's even worse. Because as I said before, Hite simply denies, that she even cares about this plan much to begin with. In the end, it's not explained well at all. Besides this, Togame's death definitely feels cheap. By this I mean undeserved or out of the blue and used only for shock value. And I say this because in a story, usually if an important character dies, there should be some kind of moral plot significance to this. If there isn't, and it's a surprise death, it should reflect the theme of the story. For example, if you're writing a story about futility, or sadness, or the world never goes the way you want it to, the event of a main character dying reflects on the tone and the morals of the story. And at the very end of Katanagatari, in a bizarre twist, they try and write in a theme to the story. The narrator talks about how the show is about the failure. Everyone wanted to do something and they failed at it. And that way we can justify all the characters dying and none of the plot threads being resolved, and nothing really making sense. We said, oh, well, they all had plans, but in the end they failed. Now, this, however, is tacked on and just isn't true. Because, the story was going along pretty well until this failure of an ending. This is where we return to my point about bad endings. There are many different kinds of endings, but if they're at odds with the rest of the story, or worse, contradict or invalidate the story that came before, they really screw up everything that led up to that point and can leave you with a bad taste in your mouth. In addition to feeling tacked on, manipulative, and out of place, here are the elements of Katanagatari that the ending contradicts or invalidates. Firstly, the journey of collecting the swords. The journey of collecting the swords is already a thin setup for your plot. Essentially, it just means your two main characters are walking around Japan collecting things. It's a device used everywhere, collect the 7 crystal stars, collect a bunch of stuff, and things happen along the way. However, as the story progresses, it's hinted more and more about what's going to happen when all the swords are together, There's some kind of master plan. Togame is going to use the swords for revenge. And in the end, we find out the swords don't do anything. This is very similar to the ending of Samurai Champloo, where we find out the premise of the show, or the final goal they were heading towards on their journey, is ultimately a disappointment. However, this can be part of the plot. That can be part of the moral of the story. As we like to say, it's not the destination, it's the journey. This would be an argument for the quality of both shows, saying what happens along the way is much more important than just the setup for the story. In that case, we would agree that collecting the swords is ultimately a superficial kind of backdrop for the real important things to happen. So, if the end goal of collecting the swords was not the important part of Katanagatari, then what was? I think we could definitely say it's the relationship between the two protagonists. When the story begins, we don't know much about either of them. There's a lot of mystery surrounding both characters. In Togame's case, we don't know her past or her true motivations. She's willing to use Shichika as a tool to get what she wants, without really giving him any information. Shichika, on the other hand, is a total social recluse. He knows nothing about the world and has devoted his entire life to martial arts. He has no qualms about killing people, doesn't really think about morality, and just does as he's told. Shichika becomes more moral and self-conscious, and begins to question his own motivations. Similarly, Togame also becomes more compassionate. She feels pity for those people she's fighting against. She starts to respect Shichika more as a person. It's heavily hinted that by the end of the series, both characters have begun to doubt what they originally started this journey for. They both now understand themselves and each other much better. This reasoning is backed up by the long and frequent dialogue scenes that really take advantage of the full runtime of each episode. We're constantly seeing the two characters teasing each other, questioning each other, and growing on each other. And that's what makes the show so special, in my opinion. While on this topic, we would be wrong to ignore the romantic aspect of the relationship between the two. In Samurai Champloo, the mood between the characters on their journey was more one of a guy road trip experience. The mood of Katanagatari's journey is definitely a romantic one. This relationship between the characters reflects their increasing humanity that we mentioned earlier. Their positions at the beginning of the story are one of master and servant, with any mention of love perhaps just being a pretense for them being together. As they grow to respect one another as partners on the journey, they also grow to respect one another as romantic partners. An interesting instance I'd like to point out is in Chapter 7 where Togame's hair gets cut. Although this is another example of harming the female character, albeit in a minor way, as incentive for the male character, romantically it poses an interesting concept. Again, having your hair cut may seem like a minor issue, but in the show, Togame's hair is given special treatment.
七花、もう髪を下ろしていいぞ。
It's really nice to see Shichika's continued love for Togame after this event. Togame's hair acted as sexual appeal to Shichika, but psychologically it served to infantilize him in their relationship. Having grown up without a mother figure, Shichika would be especially drawn to the encompassing, infallible embrace of Togame, represented through the visual metaphor of her hair. Seeing how their relationship continued through Togame's newfound vulnerability is a sign of growth for both characters. I really like this progression. As you can see, the creators of Katanagatari gave us a lot to work with these two characters. You could talk about their interactions forever. Some of the writing between them is great. It's the centerpiece of the show. Now, back to the ending, all of this is invalidated. In the end, we were told there's really nothing between the two of them, and all the growth we saw on screen was a ruse. Shichika was simply being used as a tool by a cold, calculating Togame. Choosing to use this ending essentially throws away all the progress and everything this show has built up to be. Togame never changed over the course of the journey, and Shichika is simply regulated to be a weapon, where he fights through all the bad guys to win the day. Having our collective hopes and expectations taken away like this causes us to rethink the rest of the show. If we look back at some of the episodes, namely the pirate in the suit of armor episode, the shogi episode where Togame keeps peeping in on Shichika during his sword training, the conflict in these episodes is often inconclusive, morally ambiguous, and we simply don't feel too much for what's happening in the main story. In doing this, we chalk it up to this being character development. These things will come back later to teach us something. For example, Shichika and Togame have grown closer, or each of them has learned something about themselves. But everything we were hoping to find out in the end is taken away. Therefore, it robs not only our expectations at the end of the show, but it also takes away from everything leading up to it. Even subconsciously, my enjoyment of some of the earlier episodes came from imagining what was going to happen, whether it be relating to the swords or relating to the two characters. Denying the build-up throughout the series is like having all the plot threads finally unravel, instead of giving us a coherent piece of fabric that we can enjoy at the end. I think it's a testament to the quality and appeal of the series, where I could safely say if you had a room full of people, you could brainstorm a better, more fitting, and more satisfying ending to the story. I mentioned the school days ending being completely bizarre and off the rails. The difference here is the first 90% of Katanagatari was actually good. This, unfortunately, just makes the ending all the more uncomfortable. I hope I've been able to express clearly my feelings. I thought Katanagatari was an exceptional show. You can see all the hard work that went into it, all the inspiration behind each scene. I feel like it's some sort of injustice to have this taken away. It makes me think of doujin or fan works in Japan. It happens so often on popular anime or manga series. I can imagine, once you've seen enough of these things, you get used to it. Once you find a few characters you like, some settings you like, take that and write your own story. This shows a mentality of these smaller elements having more importance than what actually happens in the series, which I think is definitely true for Katanagatari. So, if we leave it at that, and we think, if the plot gets thrown away, the character development gets thrown away, can we still watch this show and enjoy it? In the end, we still have beautiful animation and the great soundtrack. All these aesthetics are still present. So, if you're planning to watch the series solely for visual and auditory pleasure, I guess I can say that once Togame's hair gets cut, it's
髪の長い女が好みだったの？はっきり言って不愉快だわ。